Throughout Europe, the Christian Church was the major patron of the arts until the late 14th century. The art therefore relied heavily on Christian themes and functioned to decorate churches and cathedrals and tell the story of Christ and the Bible with imagery. It was also relatively symbolic, with figures being elongated, less natural and graphic. Figures were more schematic than the late Greece and later Roman work. This is due in part to a return to religious doctrinal canons similar to the prescribed ways of rendering figures we saw in Egyptian art. And it was an effort to depict the spiritual world. I also believe the fall of the Roman Empire led to artisans, craftsmen, and artists being displaced. They would have fled, and of course they had fewer patrons. The Byzantine style flourished in the East and much of Italy, and relied heavily on mosaic within their churches, a technique using colored glass bits to create images. It also offered a dazzling, otherworldly effect when used with gold leaves sandwiched between two pieces of clear glass. So, throughout the Middle Ages, the work is brilliantly designed and often extremely well crafted, but it remained static for hundreds of years. Northern European work also adapted styles from pagan traditions, as is often seen in illuminated manuscripts. So what happened to spur the late 14th century into the early Renaissance? I believe a key factor was no doubt the Black Death. Its decimation of the population left a vacuum among all classes of people. It shook the foundation of belief and left lands abandoned. The former order of nobility and clergy, merchants and farmers, and all manner of tradespeople literally collapsed. It offered an opportunity to think more broadly and examine the past. At the center of this, and just prior to the Black Death appearing, we see a new interest in depicting the human figure in space in the city-states of Florence and Siena. Duccio, Simone Martini, the Lorenzetti brothers, and others in Siena began introducing landscapes and cityscapes within their work, as did Cimabue and Giotto in Florence. These two cities were within close proximity to one another in what is now central Italy. Their early work still used the gold leaf backgrounds, elongated figures, hierarchical size symbolism, and stylized faces of Byzantine art, but they began to explore foreshortening, overlapping of figures, and modeling of flesh and drapery. Late work includes abandoning the gold backgrounds and introducing landscapes and cityscapes. Overall, more natural and earth-based scenes are chosen, even though the subject matter remains Christian. We see also a greater use of fresco and painting that offered more advantages of fluid technique as opposed to mosaic work. Plus, we have an established tradition of the use of stained glass. In some ways, this is like the advancement of drawing and painting from early Greek to later Greek pottery. And in Florence, we see a form of government that encouraged citizens to participate and allowed for freedom of thought and expression. We see a republican form of government first established in Florence in 1115 AD. Siena also adopted a republican form of government at a similar time, as both had seen a dissolution of the overarching feudal power that controlled them prior. It sounds similar to how Athens became a flourishing arts center 1,500 years earlier. Florence also became a commercial center, trading widely and amassing wealth, another key to the ability to be an art patron. As in the past, patrons would often give money to the church to create frescoes, altarpieces, and other art, and for themselves and their private chapels. Wealth also allows time to experiment and broaden knowledge, leading to a more educated society. So we have technical skills, freedom of expression fostered by a republican form of government, and wealth. It was the perfect formula for a human-centered approach to all things and fostered in humanism as a credo, bringing art down to earth once again. Reviewing the artwork of the late 13th and early 14th centuries in central Italy, we can see the Byzantine influence beginning to wane. The stylized work by Capo di Marcovaldo maintains the linear style of Byzantine rendering, but he zeroes in on the pain of Christ's suffering as shown in the face, and he also creates an overall tension in this painting. Cimabue begins to move away from the linear style while using greater modeling in the face and the hands, though the clothing is still predominantly line work and the figure remains elongated. Duccio continues down this path, with more modeling of the clothing, and the figures have a more believable proportion. Giotto now creates a much more substantial three-dimensional look, with modeling and the beginnings of perspective in the steps, chair, and the foreshortening of the figures. He also sets the figures in a believable spatial relationship. Here we see Duccio placing the figures within a landscape, though the background retains the gold sky. Scriveni chapel frescoes by Giotto, also known as the arena chapel frescoes, really introduces believable rendering and sets the figures in landscapes. He also renders the figures to scale without the hierarchical symbolism of Byzantine work. The Lorenzetti brothers embrace a non-religious subject and create allegorical paintings in naturalistic settings. Unfortunately, it's believed that both the Lorenzetti brothers died in the plague. Simone Martini also introduces the landscapes into his paintings. This is a transition over roughly 50 years. The Black Death set back some of these artistic advances, but Giotto's work ultimately guided later artists. His naturalistic work is credited with changing the style of painting in central Italy and creating a path into the Renaissance.